Those are my last words. Billy in Georgia, I love you.
Eric Dane recorded a message for his daughters knowing it would only be released after he was gone. And in it, he didn't talk about fame, success, or awards. He talked about beaches, about love, and about 4 simple lessons he hoped would outlive him. Before his passing, the former Grey's Anatomy star sat down for a deeply personal interview with Netflix. The understanding, according to publicly available reports, was that the footage would be shared later. And when the cameras rolled, he looked directly into the lens, not at the audience, but at his daughters. What he chose to say reveals far more about the man than the roles he played. The most powerful moment of the interview wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet. Eric Dane spoke softly, recalling long afternoons at beaches in California, Hawaii, and Mexico. He described watching his daughters, Billy and Georgia, running toward the ocean without hesitation. He called them his water babies, smiling at the memory. And that detail matters, because instead of focusing on illness or struggle, he focused on presence, on sand between toes, on sunlight reflecting off waves, on time. He admitted he wasn't a perfect father. He said he stumbled, he tried, he learned, and he emphasized something many parents rarely say out loud. The days they spent together were heaven. That word wasn't used dramatically. It was reflective, calm, intentional. But here's where the message shifts. Rather than framing his journey around hardship, he spoke about clarity. According to his own words, his battle with ALS reshaped how he understood life.
I want to tell you 4 things I've learned.
Not in abstract terms, but in 4 specific lessons. And the first one might surprise you.
First, live now.
Lesson 1. Live in the present. He explained that too often people postpone joy. They wait for the perfect moment, the right milestone, the next achievement. But facing a serious diagnosis changed his perspective. The present moment became everything. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, now. And that idea connects directly to those beach memories. Watching his daughters play wasn't just a pleasant memory, it was proof that being fully present creates meaning that lasts. But then he moved to something deeper.
Second, fall in love.
Lesson 2. Fall in love, with a person or with a passion. He spoke openly about love, not just romantic love, but the kind of connection that anchors you. According to his interview, he reflected on his relationship with his wife, Rebecca Gayheart, saying he had never fallen in love with another woman as deeply as he had with her. He didn't frame it as a fairy tale. He framed it as gratitude. He described their love story not as perfect, but as real, built over time, strengthened through experience. And in his final recorded message, he made it clear that loving deeply is not a weakness. It's a gift. But then comes the third lesson, and this one feels practical.
Third, choose your friends wisely.
Lesson 3. Choose your friends wisely. I emphasized that the people around you shape your mindset, your habits, and your direction. He encouraged his daughters to surround themselves with those who uplift, challenge, and support them. Not because life is always easy, but because the right circle makes challenges lighter. And that leads to the fourth and final lesson, the one that ties everything together.
Finally, fight.
Lesson 4. Face challenges and never stop fighting. Importantly, his words were not about dramatic heroism. They were about resilience, about showing up, about doing your best in circumstances you didn't choose. He didn't romanticize struggle. He acknowledged it. But he also made something clear. Giving up on life, on love, or on growth was never an option for him. And that's where the emotional weight of the message really lands. Because when someone speaks about perseverance while knowing their time is limited, the message carries a different gravity. Yet even then, he avoided bitterness. Instead, he returned to gratitude. He returned to his daughters. He returned to the ocean. And maybe that's the most unexpected part of all. When public figures share final messages, people often expect dramatic revelations, confessions, regrets, hidden stories. But what he offered instead was simplicity, presence, love, friendship, resilience, no sensationalism, No accusations, no spectacle, just clarity. And that raises an important question. If you knew your words would be replayed long after you were gone, what would you choose to say? That question lingers because in many ways, Eric Dane's message wasn't only for his daughters, it felt universal. When he reflected on his career, he didn't list accomplishments. He didn't revisit red carpets or major premieres. Despite being widely recognized for his role on Grey's Anatomy, he centered his identity somewhere else entirely, at home. And that contrast is powerful. Public life often amplifies the visible. Awards, headlines, roles. Private life builds the invisible, memories, habits, values. In the interview, he gently shifted the spotlight from the former to the latter. He described fatherhood as something he learned in real time. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but intentionally. And that honesty is what makes the message resonate. Because instead of presenting himself as a finished story, he presented himself as someone who kept learning, even at the end. Now here's something subtle but important. Throughout the interview, his tone reportedly remained steady. Emotional at moments, yes, but grounded. He didn't frame his journey as tragic. He framed it as clarifying, and that reframing changes everything. When discussing his health, he avoided medical detail. There were no dramatic descriptions, no attempts to create shock value. Instead, he spoke about perspective, about how challenges can strip life down to essentials. And when life is stripped down, what remains? According to him, love, time, and choice. Time, because you don't control how much you get. Love, because it defines how you spend it. Choice, because you decide who you become within it. But there's another layer here that often goes unnoticed. He intentionally recorded this message. That means this wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't reactive. It was deliberate. He chose his words knowing they would carry weight later. And that decision alone reveals something profound about legacy. Legacy isn't about control over how people remember you. It's about clarity in what you leave behind. For his daughters, that clarity came in the form of guidance, not rules, not pressure, guidance. Live now, love deeply, choose wisely, keep going. 4 ideas, simple in wording, complex in practice. And here's where the story expands beyond one family. Moments like this resonate because they remind us of something we tend to postpone: reflection. We assume there will always be time to say what matters, to express appreciation, to share lessons. But what if clarity isn't something we wait for? What if it's something we create intentionally? When he spoke about being a father, he acknowledged mistakes. He admitted stumbling. And that vulnerability shifts the tone away from perfection and toward growth. Growth requires humility, and humility is rarely highlighted in celebrity narratives. Yet here, it was front and center. He didn't present himself as someone who mastered life. He presented himself as someone who tried. And maybe that's the most relatable element of all. Because trying, consistently, imperfectly, is something everyone understands. Another subtle moment from the interview involved gratitude for everyday experiences. He mentioned watching his daughters play in the water for hours, not rushing them, not checking a phone, not multitasking, just watching. That image becomes symbolic. Water moves, time moves, childhood moves. But attention anchors memory, and attention is a choice. He called those days heaven. Not because they were extravagant, but because he was there, fully there. Which brings us back to the second lesson: falling in love with a person or a passion. Notice how he didn't limit it to romance. Passion matters too. Purpose matters too. Whether it's family, creativity, service, exploration, investing deeply in something meaningful creates stability during uncertainty. And uncertainty is part of every life story. Yet, despite everything, his message never leaned into fear. It leaned into intention. And that's rare, especially when the circumstances could easily invite despair. Instead, he modeled composure. He modeled gratitude. He modeled perspective. Now think about the impact of that choice. His daughters will grow up not just remembering what he said, but how he said it. Calm, present, clear, and clarity in moments like that becomes a gift. But this also opens a broader reflection. Why do messages shared at the end of life often feel more honest? Perhaps because distractions fall away. Perhaps because priorities realign. If life were reduced to 4 lessons, what would you do? If life were reduced to 4 lessons, what would yours be? Would they look similar or completely different? And what does that say about how you're living right now? There's something else that makes this message stand out. It wasn't framed as a goodbye. It was framed as a continuation. When Eric Dane looked into the camera, he wasn't asking to be remembered with sadness. He was asking his daughters to move forward with strength, to build, to explore, to choose wisely. And that distinction changes the emotional tone completely, because instead of closing a chapter, he was helping them write the next one. According to publicly available reports, he passed away in a Los Angeles hospital surrounded by family. The detail matters, not for drama, but for context. His final chapter unfolded privately, with those closest to him nearby, and that aligns with everything he emphasized: presence, connection, clarity. When reflecting on his relationship with Rebecca Gayheart, he described a love that shaped him. Not a perfect story, not without growth, but deeply meaningful. He reportedly said he had never fallen in love with another woman as deeply as he had with her. That sentence isn't about comparison, it's about certainty. Certainty about what mattered most. And certainty is powerful when spoken calmly. Now pause for a moment and think about the structure of his message. He didn't begin with advice. He began with memory. He didn't begin with struggle. He began with gratitude. That order matters, because gratitude grounds advice. It shows that the lessons weren't abstract ideas. They were lived experiences, tested over time. The beaches in California, the trips to Hawaii, the time in Mexico, the hours watching waves roll in and out. These weren't just scenic backdrops. They were anchors. Anchors to a life measured not in headlines, but in shared moments. And here's something subtle but meaningful. He didn't frame his challenges as something that defined him. He framed them as something that refined him. There's a difference. Definition feels limiting. Refinement feels purposeful. According to his own reflections, facing a serious health battle brought focus. It clarified what deserved energy and what didn't. That clarity shaped the 4 lessons. Live now, love deeply, choose wisely, keep going. But there's an underlying 5th message, one he didn't explicitly state, yet demonstrated clearly. Be intentional with your words. He knew this recording would outlive him. He knew it would be replayed. He knew it would carry weight. And instead of using that moment to create drama or headlines, he used it to create guidance. That choice alone speaks volumes, because in a world that often rewards noise, he chose calm. In a world that often amplifies controversy, he chose reflection. In a world that often fixates on endings, he focused on continuity. And that's why the message resonates far beyond one family. It becomes a mirror asking viewers, what memories are you building right now? What conversations are you postponing? What lessons would you want to leave behind? Not someday, but if you had to record them today. This isn't about predicting the future, it's about prioritizing the present. The power of his final message isn't in its sadness, it's in its steadiness. No sensational claims, no dramatic revelations, no attempts to rewrite history, just perspective. And perspective is something we often gain slowly, unless something forces us to gain it quickly. His story, as shared in that interview with Netflix, becomes less about loss and more about alignment. Alignment between words and values, between family and focus, between love and legacy. And perhaps that's why so many people found the message moving. Not because it shocked them, but because it simplified something complicated. Life isn't measured in roles. It isn't measured in public recognition. It isn't measured in perfection. It's measured in presence, in who you show up for, in how you show up, and in whether the people closest to you know exactly what you stand for. Eric Dane made sure his daughters would know. Clear, direct, unfiltered by performance, just a father speaking to his children. In the end, the power of his message isn't tied to celebrity. It's tied to clarity. 4 lessons, 1 intentional recording. A reminder that legacy is less about being remembered and more about what you leave behind for others to build on. And that raises a bigger question. If presence, love, friendship, and resilience are the pillars he chose, what pillars are shaping your life right now?
These words are for you. Good night.